which, I mean, that kind of conflicts the advice about the timer, but it's fine. Oh, you're feeling really creative right now? Well, hold on and sit there for another 20 minutes and brainstorm something else. Are you a plotter or a pantser? What outlining structure do you use? What craft book are you using? How do you get more words in one day? These are some of the big questions that I hear talked about on AuthorTube, and they're great questions. Obviously, when we're talking about writing, we talk about writing, and we also talk a lot about outlining, but one of the things that I think is not talked about as much as it should be maybe in the writing community is ideation or brainstorming, the actual act of like being creative. Because I think the hardest part of writing might be the thinking, the thinking part, the coming up, not even coming up with the idea, because that is a false narrative. A book is not one idea. It's not you have a flash of inspiration and you have the book. You have a one idea that maybe creates the spark, and then maybe 3 or 4 ideas that come up with the concept, the premise. And then as you go through the book, you are making tons, hundreds, thousands of creative decisions at every point in time. You are ideating constantly. And sometimes that is a very organic process. Other times it is a lot harder and you don't know how to solve a particular problem, or you don't know how to do X character in a good way. So you need to ideate or brainstorm. So my background is actually in product design. My master's was in bioengineering, innovation, and design, and all about sort of design thinking. And design thinking for products is about being creative. And so I am taking what I learned from my master's in design thinking and applying it to story structure. This series has 4 parts. The first part is getting started, how to set up your structured brainstorming. The second part is actual techniques to come up with creative and good ideas. The third part is evaluating those ideas and making creative choices. Some tips for how to make creative choices. And the fourth one is an example. Now, this is going to be about structured brainstorming, by which I mean you sit down at a table and you have a pen and piece of paper and you think for a while. I don't recommend doing this at the very, very start. Generally for me, I have an idea, I'll write it down, always write things down because you will forget. But I have an idea in the back of my head and I let it stay there for a while. I let it percolate, I let it come together. I let myself see things in the world that contribute to it and say, that could work, and jot things down. And eventually I have a lot of jot notes and a lot of sort of tiny unconnected ideas. And then at that point, when I feel like I have something more than that spark, some sense of what story I want to tell, I will sit down and do structured brainstorming. So, at the very start of a project, this is what I do. I will set up my page with 4 boxes: characters, plot, setting, and theme. And then I will set a timer for 10-15 minutes and write down everything I know about the story in each of those boxes. Usually, I'd say about 10 minutes is good. Once I have everything that I know about those things, I will look back, sort of abandon the boxes, and start making connections. So say I have, there's something I want to explore about, I don't know, maybe like achievement. And I'd say, well, I have a character here who's a workaholic. Okay, that goes together. So I will draw things around and let yourself go all over the page. Don't be organized at this point. Be organized and then ditch the organization, literally. Because your brain doesn't think in those linear ways, so you want to start drawing the connections. Let the mind mapping happen. I want to give a couple of notes on this. A lot of people will also recommend in this stage to think about the genre, and I also kind of agree with that. I think if you know your genre, it can be helpful to put it on the top of your page, as well as some of the conventions and obligatory scenes. If you're this early though, don't worry about it too much. Theme is also really difficult, and a lot of people don't know their theme at the start. That's hard. It's kind of nuanced, right? Like There's what your character learns, which kind of becomes the controlling idea, although it doesn't have to be just what your character learns. Ideally, it's very embedded into the structure of your story. And then of course there's like the moral problem or the moral question, and those things should be related, but different characters can have different takes on that moral problem. I'm basically talking about anatomy of story here. If you're wondering, check that book out. I love it. It's great. Good discussion on theme. So sometimes you don't know your theme until you've written your first draft, and honestly, I think that is okay. In my opinion, it will reveal itself to you, and what you risk with deciding it too early is being preachy. However, if you have ideas on it, if you have something you're interested in exploring, definitely write it down. So now you have everything that you know about the story on your page, and you've been making connections, you've probably had more ideas. Now I would write down what you do not know about the story in a big list, preferably with kind of spaces between them. Examples: I don't know who the mentor will be. I don't know this character's personality. I don't know how the characters get from point A to point B. I don't know how these characters meet. I don't know where the story is set. I have no idea what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen. I know where it starts, I know where it ends. I have no idea what happens in the middle. I don't know the character's misbelief. All of these different things. There's a lot of things you don't know. And if you're not sure what you don't know, maybe pick up, look at like some very simple 3-act structure, or watch videos on other people talking about what their elements of story are and fill them in. Again, those are your basic elements of story, and that's why we have those boxes, right? So you might not know your theme, that's okay. You might not know where it's set, that's okay. But having them in those boxes, you can kind of see where the holes are visually, ideally, and then you write the holes down. So this is where you are going to want to fill in those holes. This isn't to say you go item by item, but by seeing what you know right in front of you, you have a starting point. Now, if you are just starting a story and you have done that process, this is when you're going to want to go to my brainstorming techniques video, which is linked above. If you are in the middle of the project or in revision, generally when you're brainstorming, it's because you have a specific problem or something that is specifically not working for you. And identifying that problem can be hard. So here's an example for you. Potentially, I had a draft of my novel. Maybe I gave it over to my beta readers. They came back and they said, oh, like from scene 15 to 20 in Act 2, I was really bored. Like I wasn't engaged at all. That's a problem, clearly. And this is where I would apply the 5 why framework. And it's actually very simple. You just ask, you ask why. You ask why 5 times. And there you go, that's the framework. But basically, let's say I can't keep readers engaged through Act 2. Why? Maybe there is not enough forward momentum or external movement in the story. Why? Well, maybe it is mostly the character's interiority. The character isn't really taking any action. Why? Well, maybe there's something internal, like in her misbelief, that makes it difficult for her to go after her goal. How many whys have I done? Only 3. Why is that? Well, her misbelief is XXXX. You'll get down to it. The root cause of the problem there, I can solve that. You know, I can ask myself questions like, in what scenarios would my character be more proactive or be more decisive? Maybe I can make those situations happen so they're being proactive about something, while kind of like the main thread is taking a little bit of a lull in Act 2 because they don't know what to do or they're too scared to do it or whatever, and I can keep that forward momentum going. Or maybe I need to take some of that internal conflict and make it external. How could I make like an event that I could see like on a movie screen? How could I take what's like inside and put it out there? The idea is to identify your problem and get to something of a root cause and something of a question. Now, that's not to say that when you're brainstorming and working on this, you're only going to get ideas for that part of the story, that specific problem in, in a vacuum. No part of your story exists in a vacuum. Everything is connected. But as you work on that problem, you will likely get ideas that come from different parts of the story, or you'll get ideas that require changes in other areas. That's great. Another thing to do here in identifying your problem is to take things that are working, so moments that are compelling, scenes that your beta readers said this was amazing, or things that are in the direction that you want to go, and kind of put them in front of you, or even something that really expresses the theme. Like the good stuff, just kind of try to put it in front of you on one page, on one page, sure. And try to think, why are they working? You can use the 4 whys here again. Maybe in this scene, the scenes that my beta readers said were great, the character is making an active decision. Or maybe there's like more interiority in these scenes, so I really understand what the character is feeling, whereas in the ones they said they were confused, there wasn't enough interiority. It's sort of a, this is good, more of this. And that can help you kind of streamline your story so you are problem solving towards the good direction, if that makes sense. We always want to be pointing north, and north being like an interesting, compelling, emotional story. And anything that we have that already fits that bill, that is great. We want to shape everything to kind of match that. It can also be helpful in that same vein to write down the controlling idea, story question, moral problem, the character's misbelief, your third line if you use Story Genius, any of those like big things that are your big through lines. You want to keep that in the back of your mind at all times. Now, at this point, you're going to go off and you're going to brainstorm a million ideas. This is just getting you started. This is just the structure. But a few sort of rules of thumb for brainstorming. Number 1, set timers. Set a timer. That's how long you're going to sit there with your pen or your pencil on your piece of paper and think. Number 2, turn off distractions. Number 3, it's not one and done ever. Like a book is not one brainstorming or ideation session. You will be brainstorming and ideating all throughout a project. Just like research, they go hand in hand and feed into each other. Number 4, if you have a bit of a scene or a dialogue come to you, write it down. If you feel like you want to write a scene or like write the bones of a scene, do it. There's nothing that says you have to sit there and like complete all of your brainstorming and then go write your story. That's actually like a way you don't want to do. No process should say, oh, you're feeling really creative right now? Well, hold on and sit there for another 20 minutes and brainstorm something else. Absolutely not. Which, I mean, that kind of conflicts the advice about the timer, but it's fine. The next one is make sure you have a way of capturing your brainstorming. So at the end of the day, when you have all of your ideas, which you're going to, sit there and think of, and you can use the techniques in the other video to do that, you're going to have so many. And they're not all going to be diamonds, they're not all going to be great, but you're going to want to remember them, and most likely you have a page that's just completely messy. So I would go through at the end of a session and organize it, like plot, character, setting, theme. Like take all of my ideas and sort of slot them into those boxes again at the end of the brainstorming session. Okay, so that is the end of the how to set up your brainstorming. Now I'm going to send you over to brainstorming techniques. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Nicole Wilbur. Have a great day.